Star Trek Ascendancy expansions in review. So as I mentioned in the review for the base game, initially I believe there were 10 factions planned for the game, 3 with the base game, and slowly over the course of the last, 5-6 years, they've released 4 additional player factions and the AI kind of game-controlled Borg. Now, you can say initially the first 2 were the Cardassians and the Ferengi. They were released several years ago, and then most recently the Andorians and the Vulcans. Now, the Cardassians and the Andorians function more or less, straight ahead. The Vulcans and the Ferengi add a few more wrinkles into the play, but nothing, terribly difficult. All of the expansions have basically the same amount of systems, exploration cards, the new fleets and miniatures and tokens required to add another player. And as I mentioned, they all kind of play more or less the same. They fit into the game very well. You've got the Andorians here, with a lot of thematically, correct kind of abilities like field testing. When you win a space battle, you may take 1 destroyed enemy ship per rival defeated. Treat these as research tokens, which must be spent first. When spending research, return them when spent. So that's kind of like they're salvaging scrap and stealing tech. Starting advancement would be when an enemy retreats from you in a space battle, roll a die for each of their ships. On a 5 or 6, the ship is destroyed. When you retreat, each retreating ship may make an attack, which is really cool because you can get into space combats knowing that you'll get a free shot off when leaving. So you don't always have to have the end game of winning the space battle outright. Knowing that you'll get a free shot off. I mean, you may wind up winning as you're retreating. So kind of hit and run tactics. Very interesting. In some of the advancements, they do have these Andorian Tokens, which one of their fleets can drop off in adjacent systems, and then that unlocks abilities on some of their advancements. In addition to one of their fleets being able to take advantage of wherever those tokens are, and they of course they're limited to Ascendancy, that the Andorian player has going at that time. So some pretty interesting things. They've got a fleet that can switch with another fleet, and it's a more powerful fleet, just in terms of numbers. So they've got some interesting things. I played them once, and I was able to win with them, and I like the way they played. I mean, if I lost, I wouldn't like them so much, but I thought they were just more or less easy to use. The only wrinkle being that it cost them 2 command to commission a star base. So just a little bit more, and maybe a fleet too. So, anyways, move on. You have the Cardassians, right? Enslaving other populations, ruling with an iron fist, that sort of thing. Some of their abilities here: occupation. Cardassian-controlled systems only generate production if there is a Cardassian ship in orbit. This one's very important for the Cardassians. You can't receive any production unless you leave a ship in orbit, like we've got here on Cardassia Prime. So they have some abilities that enable them to earn more production, like this number 2 fleet over here. This is the Overseer fleet. This fleet occupies a Cardassian-controlled system during resource generation. Double the production generated by that system may not be used in orbit of Cardassia Prime. So, there are some, like, for example, this, Antipathy 4 here is a 3 production planet. With this fleet hovering over this planet or this system, you'll gain 6 production. I think there's another system in the game with 4 production. So there's a lot of really good ones in there that this fleet can take advantage of, and they also have a lot of, abilities that provide them with extra punch. Annexation, take 1 culture each time you successfully invade a planet. So things like that. Starting advancement, Cardassians begin with an additional command for a starting total of 6. So that's to try and offset for the, having to leave ships around, to gain production. But it's thematically in line with, who they are. Having to leave troops around to, keep watch over their enslaved subjects, that sort of thing, right? So I think they work really well. They're very combat driven, and I like playing them. Then you'll have the Vulcans. The Vulcans they work very differently. They start with 3 Ascendancy. They don't win outright by hitting 5 Ascendancy. They have an agenda deck, so they'll draw 2 cards. One is public that everybody can see, and one they keep just for themselves in their hand. And if they achieve either one of these, they can win the game. So to give you an example, to win the game, fully upgrade your weapons and shields. Not hard to see that one coming. To win the game, reach 8 Ascendancy. So, some different things that they do. Starting advancement, you may build ships and form fleets in any of your systems which have an ambassador. So they have these little ambassador figurines that come with the game, and they have a fleet that can go and drop them around. They can move their ambassadors throughout link systems. So this gives them that kind of reach and depth within the game that is in line again with who they are. We haven't played with them enough. I've seen some concerns online, but I haven't really delved into it. Didn't really notice anything. They look like they'd be pretty hard to win with, though. Not sure. Starting. Logical observers. Vulcans may not invade or attempt hegemony on systems controlled by a rival with a lower ascendancy. So, right away, they can't invade, other players in the first couple of rounds of the game unless they start to use their ascendancy, which they must do to build or to colonize, right? And that's to symbolize long lost Vulcan colonies spread out throughout the galaxy that, are, making contact and being colonized. So that they can actually do this throughout the board, and it's really neat. Then you have honest meddling. The Vulcan player may not lie to any other players. This, I don't know if that's enforceable. We've yet to really come up with a situation where the accusation finger was whipped out, but I would find that really hard to play. But on your turn, you may use commands to move ships of rivals whose trade agreements you hold with their permission. So that's kind of good for building alliances and whatnot. So some really interesting things going on here. One of their techs or advancements, once completed, you may discard this card. If a rival controls a Vulcan system, you may immediately declare a different uncontrolled system or system you control as your homeworld. So that's a really good one if you should be threatened, your homeworld. So they seem fairly interesting. Some of the fleets here, you've got this number 2 fleet, Science, Halitra. This fleet may re-roll any failed hazardous systems tests or brave the hazard of a phenomenon it occupies without issuing a command. So really good for mining hazards, like this number 2 fleet over here in the electrokinetic cloud. So very interesting stuff going on with them. Then you have the Ferengi. I really like the way the Ferengi work. Again, there's some really different wrinkles. They have some different cards that we're putting in the exploration deck that revolve around diplomacy and kind of allies, to gain production that move around. So really good, but profit over profundity. The Ferengi may never build culture nodes. Ferengi never add their ascendancy level to hegemony attempts. So they can, in any system, they can load up production nodes on anything. So, knock, as it says in the little rule book that they come with, that they don't care about culture. They'll knock over, culturally, important sites and raise them to the ground to build a factory, right? So that makes sense, lore-wise with how they operate. So if you have a system with, like Andor here or Palace 14, they have a production and a research, they can put down 2 production. They can't build culture nodes, but they can build research, to research weapons and that sort of thing. But these guys from the outset, they're all about production. Only Latinum lasts. During your build phase, the Ferengi may buy culture for 5 production each. The Ferengi may build production nodes on any available spot, regardless of capacity type. And then their starting advancement. During resource generation, gain 1 production for each rival-controlled system with Ferengi ships in orbit. So they have a fleet. It's a franchise fleet, and it has 5. It can have max 5 ships. It can move around and drop off ships. So you can move to 3 systems, drop 3 ships, and then, of course, disband the fleet. But then you can also trade agreements, and that allows other players to gain production for any systems where you have a ship. And you automatically gain 1 for every system with a ship. So it doesn't take long for the Ferengi to branch out. Everybody wants them to branch out because you get that extra production, especially early on in the game. And it's again very in line with the Ferengi. They're trading and doing their business with everybody out on the map. So most of the players are going to welcome the Ferengi to come and trade with them, and they'll have ships pretty much everywhere pretty quickly. But they produce, production like mad. And if they're left unchecked towards the end of the game, they can outproduce everybody. And even if they haven't done anything with their weapons or shields, they can just mass produce fleets and ships and just keep coming at you. And just by weight of die rolling, start to cause a lot of problems, even if they haven't committed to research. So, one of their advancements here, each time you complete an advancement project, take to production. So a lot of their advancements are production related. And as I mentioned, it doesn't take long before they're hitting max production on everything. So really good. I like the way that they play as well. I've played them and they're a lot of fun. So all of these, expansion factions, they mesh in with the base game ones very well. You can just, choose them randomly if you have 4 players, and it really doesn't make much of a difference, at least that I haven't seen. And then you have the Borg. Now, the Borg, you can either play with a transwarp hub in the middle of the board, you put it there, and then after it has its own rules and cards that you add into the exploration deck, or you can call them out and just play with some of the other system, discs and exploration cards that will introduce them into the game. And as I mentioned, they are AR driven. You have this combat cube board here that has 9 dice on it, so they're rolling 9 dice every time in combat. They ignore shield modifiers. The dice represent hits, so when you start to hit them and they take casualties, you remove dice. Now they can replace them. If they roll 6s at the end of each round, they can get more back. To kind of display how they're able to heal themselves and sort of adapt and that sort of thing. There's some wonky rules with them. They're fun. It's cool to have them out, but again, if they come at you too early on in the game and you're not prepared, like if the transwarp hub here, they've got a spire up and they have a build phase and a command phase like everyone else. So what they do is instantly they'll attack anybody. That's the first thing they do that they're adjacent to, like here on Palace 4. They will attack these Vulcans. Then they will have their build phase. They'll put nodes down on any of their spires. Once the spire has 3 nodes, it produces a cube. You put it up here on top, and then it flies off, kind of spews forth. And if ever there's not enough spires on the board for them, they win the game. If they're all out on the board, if they can't produce any more, but I've never seen that happen, because what happens is when you defeat a Borg cube, you get one of these really cool Borg Tac Cards, right? And some of these are really good. For example, Subspace Field Emitter. When you complete this card, immediately upgrade your shields at no cost. Discard this card when completed. So, like for example, the Klingons, when a Borg cube comes out, they want to go after it, but you can't go after them early if you don't have weapons. Your shields aren't going to make a difference, but you want to have max size fleets with upgraded weapons or some kind of ability that's going to give you a shot at defeating them, because there's kind of a tipping point with the Borg in that early on they're really hard to defeat, and if they come out of the transwarp hub and they come right towards your home world, you're almost screwed. I mean, there's really not much you can do if you don't have what it takes to defeat them right off the bat, because everybody else is not going to help you. And it can throw a player into kind of their game can be over, but they're still in it playing it, right? So what I would suggest, if early on in the game Borg cubes are coming at your home world, and you're just spending every turn, like if you see you've already gone your second turn where you're producing one ship to just try and stop it, just roll over, sign the contract that they're offering you, take the deal, let them assimilate your homeworld, and then you get to play the Borg. I mean, you're limited to what the command deck will give you, but at least you get to play as the Borg. And if they assimilate 2 players, the Borg get 2 turns, right? So they can really become a threat, but you'll have more fun doing that than just trying to fight them off. It happened to me. I've seen it happen to new players, where you're just fighting off the Borg for what seems like the whole game, and it can be hours where you're basically out of it. And you'll recognize that tipping point early on. So if you see that happening, just all your ships, leave your homeworld, let them come in and join and be assimilated and get on with having fun with the game, right? So that's my one little tip on the Borg, right? Because they can then because you'll quickly get to the point where other players or even for yourselves, once you've researched enough tech and you've got fleets out that can handle them, people are knocking out Borg cubes just for the Borg Tac, and they're kind of a non-issue at that point, right? So there is a bit of a tipping point, and you'll figure out what it is. They are fun. We've included them almost every time we play, right? But just for new players, you got to kind of watch out how things are going, and also just for yourselves, what's happening with the Borg. So they're fun. Thematically, it makes sense. There's some tweaks that you have to make. There's a lot of research, that people have done online. Some of the ambiguity of their rule set. You can almost say that they're almost broken. But if you've got a good group, you can work around it and just make rules decisions and whatnot on the fly that make sense, that you'll keep for your next future game. So there you have it. Each one of these expansions works well enough that I've seen. I haven't seen enough of the Vulcans to see, can they win with these agendas? Are they too difficult? But thematically, they look like they're a lot of fun, right? So that's it. Good stuff with this. Again, if you're a Trekkie, you like Star Trek, go ahead and grab these up. Other expansions include, there are faction-specific dice sets. There are kits with more ships and culture nodes that you can add, so you can have more ships. There's also star bases that are resin star bases. They're not painted. They're all like gray resin, but they're easy to paint. Just base them, put a wash on them, pick out some of the details. They look cool. I don't have those, but yeah. So I don't anticipate there's going to be any more expansions for this game. But there are some fan-made stuff online that you can check out and look at. And certainly, people seem to be having a lot of fun with those. But there's enough material for this game to keep you going for a long time. So I like it. It's a lot of fun. The game, it does take a while to play, but it's been fun just about every time we play. Just watch out for that early game stuff and make sure that you're doing the right things to call the decks and what have you, and watch out for the Borg. All right, thanks for watching.